Hey everyone, I hope you're well. This is the story about what if Naruto was a silent prodigy and joined Akatsuki. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well. So without any further ado, let's start the what if. Naruto gasped as he clutched the sheets tighter. He was faintly aware of someone calling out to him, but he couldn't take his eyes off the glistening knife that lay at his table. He could almost cry at the memories, the people it brought back. He shut his eyes tightly and breathed. Once. Twice. Thrice. Naruto. He opened his eyes, which widened in surprise when there was no knife. His eyes held disbelief as he scrambled over to the table, messing up the whole bed. He ran his hand over the tabletop and looked around it. Did he actually just imagine it? Maybe he was actually on the verge of madness. He looked at Sasuke, who just stood there with a confused expression on his face. He was going to ask Naruto if he was alright when Naruto, started crying. To say that Sasuke was shocked would be an understatement. He didn't know why, but he felt the urgent need to calm down Naruto. Maybe it was because he had never actually seen him cry, and he was the last person Sasuke would have expected to need consoling. Hey, are you alright? It came out more awkward than expected, and Naruto just continued standing there, with a hand covering his face and crying. Did Sasuke ever mention that Uchihas were absolutely terrible with vocal skills? What happened? This seemed to wake him up from the sudden crying fit, and he shuffled towards his bed. He pulled back the curtains and buried himself in the blankets. Sasuke couldn't decide whether he should go and talk to him or leave him alone for a while. Eventually his Uchiha brain concluded that all Naruto needed was solitude. For a while. In the evening, room 203 was visited by the current Genins. Sasuke. Ino lunged at him and Sasuke made a disgusted face, which she totally ignored. There was a heap of flowers and bouquets on his table, including some get-well-soon cards. Sakura pried Ino away and told her to stay away from her Sasuke-kun. Shikamaru stood there trying to arrange all the bouquets so that they wouldn't keep falling down while Choji munched on his snacks. Soon after, teammate entered, but that girl Hinata wasn't with them. How are you doing, Sasuke? Kiba shouted as he flicked a card at the table, unsettling all the meticulously arranged bouquets, causing Shikamaru to glare at him. Fine. Sasuke replied. Did they even know that Naruto was with him too? The thought angered him a bit, but even he wasn't sure why. He never quite liked the dobe, but this genjutsu might actually be affecting him more than he showed. Hey, Naruto's here too, right? Kiba asked. Shikamaru looked over to the curtain and said, I think so. I thought I smelled him. Kiba, Akamaru, Shino, Choji and Shikamaru started making their way towards Naruto's bed, when for some sudden reason Sasuke blurted out, he's sleeping. The guys turned around and Sakura said, he's here. Shikamaru peeped over at Naruto and confirmed with a nod. Sasuke felt like at banging a head, not his, Sakura's. How could she ask such a question? Isn't she his teammate? Didn't she know? Of course, she knew, Kakashi told her himself. He resisted the urge to snap at her and soon after the crowd departed. He looked over at Naruto's side. Was he alright? Sasuke decided to check for himself. He peeped himself and saw Naruto sleeping soundly. But what he also noticed was a bottle of pills on his table. And there was also a single small sunflower alongside it. This baffled Sasuke, as first, he was sure that no one had visited Naruto, second, he was awk the whole time, and third, there sure as hell wasn't any flower or medicines there. He would have gone and checked what medicine it was exactly, but at that moment Naruto squirmed under the sheets, and Sasuke decided against it. He would ask Naruto later. Naruto smiled at the people crouching on his window sill. Thank you. No problem, Naruto-san. Just get well soon, and anyways, this medicine is one the Uzumaki's, so it belongs to you. The guy gave him a lopsided smile. Naruto smiled at the small bottle in his hand. Here Naruto, a flower that always faces the sun for the sun himself. The girl smiled brightly at him as he took the small and delicate gift. He smiled happily at her. "Well, see you all later, I guess," he said. "Yeah, and those pills should help with the nightmares, 'kay?" The guy said in a cautious and careful tone that made Naruto want to reassure him. Naruto nodded and smiled brightly as the figures retreated. "So, what's that?" Sasuke pointed at the glass bottle. "That? Oh, that's my medicine, of course." Naruto replied as if it was obvious. "It wasn't there before." Sasuke gave him a look that asked for explanation, but all Naruto responded with was a shrug. "Oh, come on now. Spill." Sasuke deadpanned. "What spill? There isn't anything to spill. That's my medicine and the doctor probably gave it to me. I was awake the whole time." Sasuke stared at his teammate. How can someone be so oblivious? How am I supposed to know? Naruto argued back. How do you not know? And how can you take those pills when you don't even know if the doctor gave it to you or not? Sasuke narrowed his eyes at the blonde, hoping to stare him down, but Naruto looked away immediately. "Trust me, I know what's good for me and what's not." His tone was chilly, and Sasuke gave up trying to make him see reason. "What about the medicines he gave you earlier? We got the same, right?" Sasuke asked. Naruto groaned mentally, what's with this guy's interrogation? They didn't work. He stated simply. Time skip. Free at last. Naruto stretched his arms and smiled. Ha! Sasuke agreed. Oh Sasuke-kun, I'm so glad you're okay. I even got some sweets for us. We'll have them after training. Sakura beamed as she held up a small basket. Oh, does that include me too? Naruto said as he approached the basket. Stay away, Naruto. This is for Sasuke and me only. Sakura glared at the blonde who held up his hands. Alright, geez woman. You can have it all you want, I'll just head to Ichiraku's, he shrugged and started walking away. But just then Kakashi appeared holding up his book and said, hello there. I see you are now fit enough to argue. We weren't arguing, Naruto grumbled, and at the same time Sakura screeched, Naruto was arguing. Alright, Kakashi said as he closed the book, so here's the thing. After that last encounter, and all the genjutsu stuff, Lord Hokage has decided to tone your missions down. Which means? Sasuke asked. Which means that for a while now, you'll have to complete D-rank missions and do odd jobs around the village. The genin started protesting even before he had finished. Come on, sensei. Sakura pleaded. Hey, we're alright now. Naruto shouted. That's not fair. Sasuke said. Kakashi held up a hand. Sorry, but, Hokage's orders. Team 7 groaned. What are we, exceptionally talented shinobis, doing here, in the garden of some rich woman, weeding? Naruto said incredulously. Ha! Sasuke agreed. Kakashi hadn't shown up cause he had some important matters to attend to. They had only just began weeding when a servant came out and knelt beside Naruto. She whispered something to him and he stopped his weeding. Sure, yeah, I get it. He said to her. Sorry. She flashed him an apologetic smile and went back inside. Guess what guys, you're gonna have to do it all by yourself, you know. Naruto said as he stood up and dusted his pants. What? Why? Sakura screeched. Sasuke looked up at him with a questioning look. Well, you see. Naruto trailed off. What? Sasuke snapped. He wasn't happy with the fact that he had to all this work with Sakura, alone. This woman doesn't want me here. He said. Oh really? Sasuke drawled, and why? Naruto looked at him curiously. You don't know? Sasuke stared at him. Naruto sighed and said, well, let's just say I'm not so popular with the villagers. They prefer not having a Naruto within 10 meters of their house. With this explanation, he walked away, leaving behind a rather confused Sasuke and a pouting Sakura. He whistled as he lounged on a tree near the training camps, thinking about the several ways people could die. Hey! A voice said. He turned around to meet a pair of bright yellow eyes on the opposite tree branch. Kito! Naruto said with a sigh of relief. After all, not everyone could sneak up on him. Kito was around 15 with red, long hair that came up to his shoulders. He wore a red kimono with gold lining and carried 2 katanas. He was the one who had taught Naruto kenjutsu and had saved him on various occasions, so basically, Naruto owed him a lot. Not money, but he did. If that makes any sense. Anyways. Kito crouched on the branch with a rather graceful poise. Naruto secretly envied him and his grace. Kito could jump and run as if gravity didn't affect him, as if he was gliding, and Naruto suspected that he did it on purpose around him. It didn't help that Kito was a fox. His hearing and sense of smell was far greater than Naruto, and so he had taken on the job of training Naruto. Well, he was like an elder brother to him, but not exactly like an elder brother. If that makes any sense. Oh wait. So what are you doing here? Kito asked. Naruto laid back down and closed his eyes and said, you know, the usual. We had to weed this rich old lady's garden, and she was one of the OMG I need to save this village from this fox demon, so let's boycott him group, and her servants told me to get lost, but politely. So, yeah. Kito laughed and Naruto opened an eye. Hey, what's so funny? He asked with an accusatory tone. Who thought you could speak so much? You must be pissed. Kito laughed some more. He tipped back, but didn't fall, obviously due to channeling chakra to his feet. When are you getting out of this hellhole? A girl's voice came from directly above him. Kami! He shouted in surprise as he crouched with his kunai in his hand. Oh my god, Hitomi! Stop sneaking up on me! Naruto said exasperatedly. Your senses have dulled. She stated, staring straight into his eyes. Her sea green eyes bore into his and he, not wanting to look intimidated, narrowed his own eyes. No, your senses improved. Naruto stated, but she kept staring at him. Whatcha looking at old lady? He said. An ugly punk. She retorted, sitting up on the branch. Unlike Kito, she wore a black shirt with a leather belt and jacket. Her pants were full of pockets, with various weapons and scrolls. Being a weapon master, she was skilled with almost every kind of sword and shurikens and whatnot, whereas Naruto had had a hard time only learning the basics of the proper wielding of katana or something like that. Weapons were the only thing that Kito and Hitomi agreed on, which was the only reason of them staying a team. So, that sunflower kinda died. Naruto said, picking out a turquoise hair from his jacket. Of course, it did. Do you want me to get ya an immortal one from Orochimaru or something? She snorted. That would be nice. Naruto mumbled. So what are you doing here? Kito held out a scroll and told Naruto about how they had spotted Zabuza Momochi and his minion. We managed to get it to the Hokage, so maybe they're going to dispatch a team of Anbu or something. He said. Kakashi would be dispatched too. If they use the right tactic and you know. Hitomi said. Naruto replied. He had read about Zabuza, a rather formidable enemy. He was known to have an ice user with him, very rare. So, when are you getting out of this hellhole? She asked again. Her turquoise hair shone under the sun and her eyes glinted with part anger, part frustration. She hated seeing Naruto being treated like this. If Lord Kurama liked him, what right did those villagers have to hurt him? Had he ever done anything to them? They made him what he is today, and they're lucky to not have encountered it yet. I don't know. Naruto said, which surprised Hitomi. She looked at his with confusion when Kido said with a lopsided grin, like his pick, "You like that Sasuke, don't you?" Naruto's eyes widened. What? When did I say that? No. No. I'm not into that kind of stuff, are you crazy? He stared him with shock. Kido laughed again. As a friend, you baka. He said and grinned, earning a low kick which he easily dodged. Hee. One thing, Naruto asked Hitomi, that I don't understand is, how you get these scrolls to the Hokage. Hitomi waved her hand as if it was nothing. Oh, it's nothing. We just put it in the right place and wait for them to find it out. It's just coded enough for them to think of it as some information carried by rogue ninjas. Clever. Naruto commented, impressed. I know, right? Humans should ask for our help more, but no. Superiority complex. He spat out the last part in mock disgust. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly as if apologizing for those humans with superiority complex. Alright, we gotta go now. Hitomi said, standing up. She held out a scroll and told Naruto to practice whatever was in there. She would train him properly later. Yeah. Naruto said, as he watched those two turn into foxes, their natural state. One was bright red with orange streaks, while the other was bright turquoise, sure looked rather out of place, with a gray streak. They ran off into the bushes as Naruto started towards his house. Sasuke and Sakura stood in the Hokage's office waiting for Naruto. They waited for a long time, but he didn't make an appearance. Even the Anbu sent to call him couldn't find him. At last the third Hokage sighed and delivered the news to only those present, hoping they would pass on this information to their teammate. Your sensei, that is, Kakashi Hatake, has been dispatched for an S-ranked mission along with Asuma and Kurenai. Meanwhile, their teams can do odd jobs around the village and train for the upcoming Chunin exams. This mission will probably take a week or so. Any questions? The Hokage finished with a deep breath. TCH, where's Naruto? Sasuke asked. He couldn't care less about Kakashi. This mission of his only gave him enough time to practice for the exams. And they hadn't seen Naruto since that weeding job yesterday. The Hokage sighed and said, he must have gone wandering somewhere. He wasn't at home, so in case you see him, tell him what I told you. Sakura and Sasuke mumbled an okay and went out. Once outside, Sakura began her fawning. OMG, Sasuke, isn't this perfect? No sensei, no Naruto, let's go out somewhere. She smiled creepily at him. I have to train. He simply replied and walked away. A few days passed with not much activity, when on the fourth day a Jonin gathered Sasuke, Sakura, Team Asuma and Team Kurenai. It wasn't a big mission, they only had to do some monthly checks in certain shops. So, where's Naruto? Shikamaru asked Sasuke. I don't know. Haven't seen him for quite a while. He replied. That's weird. The village seems very quiet without him around. Where did he go anyway? He asked while he fanned himself with the clipboard. Man, what a drag. Sasuke ticked another box and said, who knows where he went. Maybe I'll stop by his house later. Pretty sure he's lazing around, that loser. Shikamaru sighed and sat down at the base of a rack. I think something's wrong, I dunno why, I'm not getting a good feeling about this. He sighed and fanned himself. Are you done yet? We have to move. Sasuke looked at him and walked past him. Shikamaru followed. Ino and Sakura were talking about how peaceful the village was without Naruto, and Kiva was arguing that it wasn't any fun. It's fun to see him create trouble. Kiba said. No, it's not. He causes too much trouble. Ino protested. Yeah, it's better this way. Sakura crossed her arms over her chest and glared at Kiba, who simply gave up. They completed the mission and headed back to their own houses. Except Sasuke, who made a detour to Naruto's house. More like apartment. It was dingy building and he jumped on its roof near Naruto's window. He was about call his name when he noticed the condition of the apartment. The biggest things there were the bed and the table. Books, clothes, and empty ramen cups littered the place. Some things seemed natural, like Naruto had thrown them, but some things like the cutlery and broken dishes seemed like someone else's doing. He opened the window and entered the house. He did not call out for Naruto because he was, obviously, not there. He walked over the broken dishes and into the kitchen. The place was a mess. Naruto clearly hasn't been home lately. With a sigh, he walked out of the door and almost collided with a neighbor. "Watch where you're going, boy," she said harshly. Sasuke calmly looked into her eyes and asked, "Do you know where Naruto went?" She rolled her eyes and said, "What is up with everyone asking for him?" "No, I don't know where that brat went, and anyways, good riddance." Sasuke frowned and let the lady pass. What does she mean by everyone asking for him? But, like he always did, Sasuke shrugged everything off and went back to the training grounds. Naruto was probably causing trouble somewhere. He could take care of himself. "Hello there, my precious genins. It's good to see you again." Kakashi smiled and held up a hand. He and the other senseis had returned from their business and they had resumed training. "Hey, where's Naruto?" he asked. Sasuke shrugged. Sakura pouted and replied, "Haven't seen him all week." Kakashi looked surprised, and was about to say something when someone landed behind Sasuke and Sakura. "Hey, how are you today, Naruto?" He looked off. His hair was disheveled and messy. It seemed less dense, like someone had taken the life out of them. And his jacket was open, it was usually zipped up. His clothes were dirtier than usual and his eyes seemed dull with some black circles. "Where were you, Dobe?" Sasuke was the first one to react. Naruto awkwardly rubbed the back of his head and said, "Just doing stuff, wandering." "Wandering," Sakura scoffed. "Probably causing trouble in some other village or something." Sasuke noticed Naruto's expression harden and saw him scowl, but only for a fraction of a second, after which he smiled brightly at Sakura and told her to relax. This surprised Sasuke, who had never seen Naruto display any emotion like anger, much less scowl so professionally. He basically thought that Naruto was one of those kind of people who just didn't know how to hate. "Well, let me just tell you that our mission went smoothly and we don't have any particular mission today, so how about sparring?" Kakashi suggested. The genins shrugged and started walking to their training ground. Kakashi cast a glance at Naruto, who was walking beside him, sort of nonchalantly, but with his years of expertise, he knew that Naruto was either tense, angry, or frustrated. It wasn't obvious, and the fact that Naruto could unconsciously mask his emotions so well surprised Kakashi. But of course, he didn't ask. Because he didn't think it was any of his business or that Naruto would tell him. Maybe he should have. Upon reaching the training grounds, Kakashi first had Sakura and Sasuke fight and then the winner would fight with Naruto. It was just basic taijutsu, not much. The spar between Sakura and Sasuke was over before it even began. Kakashi had snapped his fingers and in a second Sasuke was behind Sakura with his kunai to her neck. The three boys sighed and wonderful whether Sakura could ever become a proper kunoichi. "Well, Naruto." Kakashi called Naruto, who groaned and complained about how he never got any rest. "Take it easy, Sasuke." He smirked. Sasuke gripped the kunai tighter, with no intention of sparing this knucklehead. Kakashi snapped his finger and began reading his bright orange book of not suitable for children content. Sasuke and Naruto charged at each other, Sasuke and Naruto style, and clashed with their kunai. Naruto held his footing and tried to kick Sasuke's leg from beneath him, but he backflipped away. Sasuke charged again and aimed for his stomach, which he rather cautiously and alarmingly dodged. His eyes were wide as if he'd just escaped some sort of apocalypse, and this made Sasuke smirk. "Scared?" he taunted. Scared my ass. Naruto regained his composure and ran at him again. They kept this up for quite a while, and then finally when Sasuke managed to grab and twist Naruto's arm behind him, and lock his leg, so that he couldn't kick him, was the match over. Kakashi called it a day and disappeared, while Sakura dawned over how strong and amazing Sasuke was. Meanwhile, near a tree Naruto rubbed his wrist gently, trying to hold all the pain in. After all, he couldn't cry in front of them. Probably causing trouble in some other village or something. He scoffed. As if. That stupid girl. She had no idea what he was going through. What he regularly went through. He didn't want to stay out here any longer, and decided to head back home. After all, he had to clean up whatever mess the villagers must have created. Those damn villagers. They never leave an opportunity. He walked past Sasuke and hoped that Sasuke would ignore him like he usually did, but unfortunately, Sasuke was playing detective right now. Hey, what exactly were you doing? Why didn't you come for training? He asked. Naruto chid. He hated all this interrogation. As if he was some sort of criminal. At this moment, he felt like a very sassy Naruto. I hate training, he said and turned around, especially when you only want to train by yourself. I don't train by myself. Oh really? Sasuke narrowed his eyes. Naruto narrowed his eyes back. Sakura went ahead and slapped him. Naruto. Not Sasuke. Naruto's eyes were wide with surprise and anger. How dare you glare at Sasuke? You don't compare to him in any way. Stop acting like you could actually ever reach his level, you loser. She screeched. Naruto rubbed his cheek. He looked like he was about to shout at Sakura, and he even glared at her for a few seconds, after which his glare dropped. Instead, he just looked tired, like he had heard this millions of times. Sorry. You're right. My fault. Shouldn't have glared him. He apologized to Sakura, who was a tad bit surprised as well, and then he turned and faced Sasuke and bowed to him and said rather formally, "Sorry for glaring at you." Sasuke blinked. How does one respond to this situation? Naruto turned and walked away. Later that night, all Sasuke could think about was how Naruto's personality seemed to fluctuate with every moment. As if he was constantly arguing with himself about how to present himself. Sasuke thought he knew the dope. But it seems there's more to him. Naruto lay in bed listening to the crickets chirping. He couldn't sleep. At all. And his injuries wouldn't let him train. He wondered how everyone could be so oblivious to someone's suffering. How people just walked by someone who was clearly having problems. How people choose to ignore all these silent cries for help. These people, they create monsters. So monsters they will face. Lately, Naruto had been acting weird. For starters, he wasn't talking as much as he used to, and his actions were lousy, like he didn't care about anything. Sasuke, along with the rest of the Konoha 12, found this incredibly suspicious. More like weird. Kiba said. They were hanging out under a tree near the weekly market, and the only one not there was Naruto. It wasn't like they ever invited him to join though. Maybe he's plotting something. Making us insecure? Ino said with her eyes wide. Insecure? Him not talking makes you insecure? Shikamaru was bewildered. Hey, that's totally not what I meant. She retorted. Maybe he's sick. And honestly, I don't understand why we're all worrying about it so much. Why do you care? Sakura scoffed, disgust and confusion lacing her voice. Like it or not, Sakura, he is one of us now, and we have to look out for him. For the village. Niji noted. He wasn't a huge fan of Naruto, especially since he was the demon fox. His fate was sealed. He was meant to be hated. I hate it when you make sense. Kiba ched. Ched is a word that should be used more often, honestly. Just then, they saw Naruto. Speak of the devil. Tenten muttered. He was walking along the market looking at goods that the merchants of other villages brought. Do you think he's looking for a special type of ramen? Lee asked, totally curious. Who knows? Sasuke replied. To their surprise, he stopped at a shop which sold extensively made swords and katanas. The merchant seemed to know Naruto and handed him the best sword on display with a smile. Naruto held it in one hand and then on his palm, balancing it. In a quick motion he twirled the sword and held it up with astounding grace. Whoa! Did he just do that? With a sword? Tenten asked. Being a weapon master, she knew exactly how hard it was. I guess he did. Shino said. Since when did he know how to use a sword? Kiba asked. Has anyone ever seen him use a sword before? Once. On our first mission. That too a clone was using it. Sasuke noted, remembering that moment. They watched quietly as Naruto removed a scroll and summoned a katana, handing it to the man. Yeah, that's what he was using. Sasuke pointed out. Naruto held his katana as the merchant took it from him. A younger woman, his daughter probably, came out and smiled at the blonde and took the katana in. Naruto followed her in. I want to have a look at this merchant. Tenten said. So the 11 of them went to that shop. The man wasn't so old, around 38. He smiled at the group and asked them what they were looking for. What's your name, sir? Sakura asked him. My name is Mr. Yashizuke and I bring the best quality swords from the land of steel. He said. Sasuke went ahead and picked up a kunai. The blade was the sharpest that he had ever seen, the best indeed. He asked about the sword that Naruto had just used. Oh, she is Mitsuyu. Isn't she a beauty? Mind you, it's quite heavy. He said, gently placing the sword in his hand. It had a dark blue handle and a slightly curved blade. Sasuke was surprised at the weight of it. He could barely hold it straight with one hand. Who was that guy you gave this to some time ago? Sasuke asked. He wanted to know how exactly did this man know Naruto. Oh, that boy. Well, he once saved my daughter and so I gave him the best katana that I had. He still uses it and that red-haired friend of his teaches him. He's still a valuable customer, perfectly analyzing the qualities of a sword. He's in right now. My daughter is probably sharpening his katana at the moment. He smiled as he said this. The group thanked him and departed. Sasuke's brow furrowed as he thought about the man's words. Who's the red-haired man he spoke of? He finally asked. All of them shrugged. How annoying. Sasuke thought. Guess only one guy can answer that question. Should we ask him? About everything? This was spoken softly and they turned to see that it was Hinata who had spoken. I'm not sure. It isn't exactly the best thing to do, and what makes you think he will tell you anything? Niji answered. As much as they disliked it, they all had to agree. They promised never to breath a word of all that had happened today to anyone. They would find out. Someday. Someday, they would find out everything about Naruto Uzumaki. Wow. You are so dumb. Shut up. I don't care. Yeah. Let them see your katana. Let them see your kenjutsu skills. Let them see this high-quality steel stuff. Not at all suspicious. After all, why wouldn't Naruto have these things? Shut up, Kurama. I'm sure they won't ask me anything. Is this sharp enough? Mayo, Mr. Yashizuke's daughter, asked him. She held the blade carefully and demonstrated it. She sliced a tomato and a watermelon in half in a blink. Yeah, it will easily slice through a tree, it seems. Naruto grinned. Can't wait till you show it to your teammates. I'm not showing it to them. Oh yeah. But they know about it. I wanted them to know. I know they were looking, Kurama. Of course, said Kurama sarcastically. Of course, you knew they were looking. It was your plan, wasn't it? Yes. Finally you understand. Kurama did not understand. And he sighed in defeat. Naruto kept the katana back in his scroll and left the shop. He was aware of the fact that his teammates and other teams had been here only a few minutes ago. Avoiding local merchants, Naruto made his way to the training grounds. The Chunin exams are coming up. I must practice. After that I can do whatever I want. No more Team 7, no more Sasuke-kun, no more losing. He sliced a few trees with a wind jutsu using his katana. Stupid goddamn village. Stupid goddamn Sasuke. Stupid goddamn Sakura. A punch and a kick. A punch and a kick till the tree trunk had a huge gaping hole in it. What do they are? What do they think I am? I am not a monster. He ran up to a tree and using its support jumped back in midair and threw kunais at targets. They all hit bullseye. He crunched on his knees, breathing hard, his eyes no longer blue, but red. Slow down. Naruto inhaled and exhaled. He opened his eyes, which had returned to their normal shade of blue. You aren't so good at controlling my chakra yet. I know. Just then he sensed something. Someone's chakra. He whipped around just in time to see someone hide behind the bushes. Without thinking or meaning to, that is, out of instinct, he pulled out a shuriken and threw it at the bush. Suddenly a blue figure jumped out and landed on a tree branch. Sasuke, he said. It wasn't a cheerful tone. More like look who showed up tone. He smirked. What are you doing on that branch, Sasuke? He asked. What are you doing out here, dope? Sasuke retorted. Oh, I dunno, training. Naruto snapped. Why does this goddamn Uchiha always have to interrogate him? What about you? He asked. All this was making him annoyed. The last thing he wanted was Sasuke here. The amazing Uchiha prodigy. More like stuck-up duck. I came to train. Sasuke responded. He jumped down from the tree and walked over to Naruto, who was casually leaning on something invisible. He looked different, with his hands in his pockets and open jacket. His hair wasn't as bright as it used to be and was rather messy. His clothes were dirtier, as if he didn't bother cleaning them for the last couple of days. Well, Sasuke had decided not let his guard down. Not after learning about the katana and this precise display of shuriken jutsu. Really, so you want me to leave? Naruto quipped. His tone suggested a hint of scorn. And much to his surprise, Sasuke said no. I want to spar with you. He said. What? Naruto deadpanned. I mean. Why, I'll lose anyway. He drawled, forcing some of that scared tone in it. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. No way was this dope getting ahead of him. Sasuke had to be the strongest. Whatever this blonde was hiding, Sasuke would find out and what? Sasuke grew annoyed. Impatient even. You won't lose if you actually fight. Sasuke told him. Naruto smiled. He knew that Sasuke was already suspecting him. And he wouldn't be fooled for long. He also knew that if he displayed even a fraction of his true abilities to the Raven, it would be enough to disgruntle him. That would make him train even harder, and it would be a good cover for his own excessive training. With a smirk, Naruto accepted the challenge, and so the spar began. They jumped at each other and sliced the air. Always, every freaking time one of them would use a substitution jutsu and then jump at the other from behind. Every move was met with a similar move. Every blow was equal. Once, Sasuke managed to get Naruto in his hold and blew a fireball at him, when another clone jumped out of nowhere and used a very powerful wind jutsu which he conjured with his katana. This wind sliced at everything in his wind and turned the fireball into a tornado that, due to the force of the wind, moved towards Sasuke himself. After many such instances, both of them, breathing heavily, stood in front of each other in a fighting stance, waiting for the other to strike. None of them made a move. They just stared at each other as the wind blew, the birds sang. The world carried on, not caring for two naughty teens and their tiny spar. Just then, in a whirl of leaves, none other than Kakashi Hatake appeared. "Sup," he sang, one hand held up in a greeting and the other holding the orange book, whose name, as Naruto had recently discovered, was Make Out Paradise, not really a book for kids. "Sensei." "Kakashi." "Twerps." The three stared at each other. When finally Naruto spoke, "What are you doing here Debayo?" Sasuke glanced at the blonde, noticing how his accent and verbal tic had returned. Also his posture seemed to relax. He looked a lot like he used to. Well, Kakashi flipped a page. That fire tornado was pretty hard to miss, don't you think? He looked at the two genins, and wondered how he even got stuck with them. He sighed and shut his book. He placed his hands on his two students. "Now, kids. What do you think happens when leaves get too close to fire?" he asked with a smile. "They burn." Naruto deadpanned. "Absolutely right. Now, what do you think happens when a whole goddamn forest gets too close to a goddamn fire tornado?" No longer smiling, a tick mark appeared on Kakashi's head, his grip on the two tightened and the blonde and Raven realized how deep in Dada they were. They faltered. "Right. Maybe, just maybe the Hokage wants to talk to you," Kakashi said in a sickly sweet voice. With that, he took them to the Hokage. They received quite a bit of scolding. "No. More. Fire. Tornado. The training grounds," said the old man. While exiting, Naruto as carefree as ever asked Kakashi, "So what did you do with Zabuza's sword?" Kakashi stopped reading and Sasuke turned around. "What do you mean?" Kakashi questioned, his tone even. "Zabuza? You went on a mission recently?" His tone was cheery, but Kakashi's wasn't. Once out of the building, Kakashi asked him where he got that information. It was a secret mission that only a select few people knew about. Naruto's smile only widened. "Well, guess it wasn't much of a secret, right?" "Naruto, where did you learn about it?" "The villagers know things. I heard from here and there. It was a CCR. Not every secret is kept. Many things get out. And trust me, I know how good this village is with secrets." His tone was serious and even Sasuke was left puzzled. With that, Naruto walked back home. He had carefully hinted at the fact that he knew about the Kyuubi. And of course, he knew about Zabuza before they did. Team 7 had gathered on their regular spot on the bridge, and as always Kakashi was late. Sasuke leaned on the railing, Sakura sat cross-legged plucking the petals from a flower and Naruto was leaning on his stomach on the railing reading a scroll. It was actually information from Kido and Hitomi. They were returning in a few days from the Sand village, where they had gone to inspect some suspicious behavior. Whatever. It said something about a Jinchuriki, but Naruto wasn't bothered by that. After all, he had the 9 tails, the strongest bijou. What did he have to worry about? "What have you got there?" Sakura asked him again. She now held another wildflower and was slowly dissecting it. "Nothing, just a scroll," he replied. But this time Sasuke asked him too. "You've been reading with a lot of concentration. What is it about?" Naruto sighed. For some dumb reason he could never resist Sasuke's queries. After all, he rarely raised any, and whenever he did, it made that topic seem questionable. With a sigh, Naruto rolled the scroll and kept it in his jacket. "Just a little something from a friend," he replied evenly. His tone seemed to challenge Sasuke, and so he retorted with, "Poof, your red-haired friend?" Naruto froze for a second, but it was enough for Sasuke to take notice. He smirked. "What? You thought we don't know? Who is he anyway?" "I don't know any red-haired person in Konoha." You don't know anyone, Naruto grumbled, but Sakura perked up. Yeah, I know everyone in this village, but I don't know anyone with red hair. She hoped this small action from her side would result in Sasuke smiling down at her and maybe even consider going on a date with her, but alas. He kept on glaring at the blonde before them, silently challenging him to spill the beans. But it wasn't as if he was unprepared. He had thought that they would confront him about this. Not about Kido though. He didn't know that Mr. Yashizuki told them about him. He totally hadn't anticipated that, and would prefer if they didn't know about his fox summons. But, still, he had a good excuse to snake his way around this one. Who told you that? He asked coldly. Mr. Yashizuki, I suppose you know him. Sasuke replied. He tilted his head forward in a pointed manner. Of course I do, but what I mean is, why did he tell you? Naruto asked, burrowing his hands in his jacket's pockets, where they brushed against the scroll. We asked him, you idiot. Sakura sneered, which was quite the wrong thing to say as Sasuke discreetly rolled his eyes. So much for having the upper hand. So, you were following me? Naruto raised his eyebrow at them. Of course he knew they followed him that day, but still, he needed to make them understand that they should stay out of his life. No, we were not. Sasuke tried making up for Sakura's, slip-up, rather, intentional slip-up. We were only passing by that shop, and happened to see you enter that shop. So we asked the owner if it actually was you. Naruto was impressed. That was a nice cover-up. But cover UPS can't hide facts, especially when you know them. With a final sigh, Naruto told them, it's none of your business, and he's not from here, so you wouldn't know him. As if on cue, in a swirl of fresh green leaves appeared. Any guesses? Kakashi. Never mind. Sup, kids? He said cheerfully, only to be met with a, you're late, from all three of his students. Aha, about that, you see, an old lady needed help with her groceries, and so. He trailed off with an awkward laugh and rubbed the back of his head with an apologetic smile. The three Genins sweat dropped at the terrible excuse. But. Anyways. I have some news. Some good news. He jumped down from the railing and I smiled with a mysterious air. Say what now, sensei? Naruto deadpanned. Kakashi regained his composure and whipped out 3 forms. You see, I think you should participate in the Chunin exams. He told them. He looked at them for a while and finally Sakura said, are you asking us? To which Kakashi replied, yup. Well, you kinda forgot the question mark and, never mind. Naruto grumbled. After staring at his form for a long time, Sasuke asked, you really think we're ready? Kakashi looked at him, remembering his days at the Anbu with the Uchiha Prodigy, Itachi Uchiha, and couldn't help but compare the two brothers. He looked at Naruto, his sensei's son, who didn't even know that. Kakashi couldn't help but compare him to his dad as well, and, to be completely honest, they were nowhere near their predecessors. As for Sakura, well, she was from a civilian family, it would be a miracle if she even passed the Chunin exams. So, with a sigh, but honestly he told them that they were not, in fact, ready. But, he held up a hand, and told them that there was still enough time for training. 2 months is a long time and don't worry, you can do it, and anyways, you can always try again later. He finished with a dismissive wave of his hand. It was enough to calm down Sakura, but not the boys. Each of them raged with mixed emotions. For Sasuke it was the first step to defeating Itachi and rebuild his clan. He thought that this wasn't just an ordinary test, but the only way to prove to his brother, himself, and everyone else that he was in fact the best and that the Uchiha will always be the best. If he couldn't even defeat these Genins, how could he hope to win against Itachi? He gripped paper harder, and then glanced at Naruto, who held the paper lightly as if it was a joke. His nonchalant expression made Sasuke angrier, especially since the way he used to see Naruto had radically changed, only in a few weeks. Who knew what else he was hiding, how strong he actually was? And what if everyone was equally strong? What if he was the one who was left behind? Naruto held the paper lightly. Finally, his ticket to freedom. Once he passed, everything would change. He knew for a fact that he was considerably stronger than Sasuke, but what if he awakened his Sharingan in the months leading up to the exams? What if he lost to someone from another village? He couldn't lose. He couldn't let all those things happen to him again. It was frustrating, the fact that he knew so less about the other villages, their strengths and trump cards. He made a mental note to himself to ask Kido and Hitomi to gather some info on them for him. He looked at Sasuke, who was visibly anxious. Naruto scoffed lightly. It was pitiful how someone so proud could so easily be swayed by the mere aspect of a challenge. Ha! Naruto walked towards his apartment, form in hand. He pondered over the different strategies he could use. Of course, he was going to participate. He could easily beat these dumbheads. But he wasn't too sure about the other villages. What if they had special powers like the Uchiha or Hyuga? Or what if they learned jutsus since they could walk? He stroked his chin, closed his eyes, and let out a sigh. I think you're overreacting. Kurama offered his opinions. And there goes Lazy Fox offering enlightenment. How would you know? In case you had forgotten, I'm a few thousand years old. Oh yeah. Naruto said out loud. A few random villagers glanced at him but were ignored. Suddenly, he stopped. He looked up and found himself staring at his apartment. He hadn't realized that he had already reached. For some reason, his instincts told him to not go home, and without questioning it, he turned back around and headed for the river. The apartment lay ransacked, as it often was. No lock could resist the anger of the villagers, and so the blonde tenant had resorted to living without a lock. Another horde of villagers came to this apartment to take out their anger. Unfortunately for them, the person they would have liked to take out their anger on was not here, so they simply ransacked the place. The table was turned, dishes were broken, and the meager clothes were strewn about. With that, the men left the place, slamming the door. Sasuke was at the bench near the outskirts of the village. He had signed the form but was unsure of his decisions. What kind of test would they have to go through? He rubbed his forehead and sat up. He knew he could take on most of the Leaf Genins, but was unsure about the other villages. Especially since his Sharingan had not yet activated. How frustrating. He needed some special trick up his sleeve, but what? Maybe he should ask Kakashi. Maybe, yeah. His sensei wasn't so famous for nothing. There must be something that he could do. Now comes the tough part, looking for him. Sakura had already signed up the form and kept it tucked away in her pocket. It where she has pockets, but she does, so please bear with it. She happily wandered the streets when she ran into a silver blonde girl, with hair into a high ponytail and, quite, revealing purple attire bent over a vase of sunflower. Oh, look who we have here. The blonde taunted, standing up and holding a sunflower. Oh yeah, it's Ino Pig. Sakura snorted. Billboard brow, the blonde retorted, the two glared at each other and with a sharp turn walked away. Next day. All right, Kakashi said, his hands folded over his chest, what did you decide? His three students held out their forms together, all signed. Behind his mask, Kakashi smiled. As expected. He said. We'll still have to do missions though. To which they all groaned. As they ran around in the training grounds, Naruto came to Kakashi and sat down near him. He took a sip from his bottle/flask, as he watched Sasuke complete his 28th round. Sakura lagged behind him, desperately trying to catch up. Sensei, Naruto spoke, making Kakashi look up from his book. Yeah. What did you do with his sword? The blonde questioned. Whose sword? You know, Zabuza's. Again, Kakashi was surprised that Naruto knew of it and was actually asking him about it. He wondered who else knew. He scratched his chin and answered, actually, we didn't kill any of them, we managed to capture Zabuza as well as his servant, Haku. Thought he was a girl. He muttered at the end. What? Oh, nothing, and also on a rather short notice we got the orders from the Hokage to deliver them to the Mizukage. It would be seen as a gesture of peace and they had some business with him anyways. So, good deal, they just might agree to an alliance. Kakashi said with a shrug. Naruto nodded and stood back up. He dusted his pants and went back to running. He had a lot of things to ask Kido and Hitomi. The same thing happened with all the Genin squads, they all decided to sign and were motivated by their senseis. After training, as Team 7 walked along the busy streets of Konoha they all ran into the other teams. Greetings were exchanged and finally they all decided to have dinner at the barbecue place. They didn't notice, but Naruto trudged unhappily after them. They hadn't particularly told him to not come, and they hadn't particularly told him to come. Arf. Anyways, he was finally sitting with them as Choji ordered for all of them. Soon, their food and they all started talking. The food was good and no one was exactly talking to him, so Naruto quietly ate, relishing everything. After all he rarely had barbecue. He got so busy in it that he didn't notice someone calling him. It was only when Shikamaru poked him with his chopsticks that he looked up, slurping the piece of barbecue in his mouth. Kiba sighed and repeated, I asked why you're so quiet today. Naruto blinked, causing most of them to roll their eyes. What do you mean? I mean, Kiba was practically forcing the words out, why have you suddenly become so quiet? You used to shout all the time and constantly cause trouble, so what happened? You haven't said a word since we got here. Well, first, he did not know that Kiba actually noticed, and second, why the hell did he? I dunno. He said meekly, cringing at his own terrible, lame excuse. Everyone at the table sighed and practically face-bombed. Is it because of that genjutsu mission? Hinata asked quietly. Once again all heads turned towards him. Naruto wished he could just disappear. All those stares, those eyes, he shifted uncomfortably. As if on cue, the owner of the restaurant, a big man, came to their table and pointed at the blonde. You! Didn't I tell you stay away from my shop? He bellowed, causing confusion to spread amongst the genins. Ah! Choji began but Naruto stood up suddenly, his composure changed all of a sudden and with a confident voice he said, I know, just looking how long it took you to find out. By the way, the barbecue really is good. He grinned and patted the owner and walked away, hands in pockets. He seemed as if he was relishing the anger aimed at him. As if he loved it when people shouted at him and when he retorted back. The genins just stared at his retreating figure and then to Sasuke and Sakura who merely shrugged. What the hell was even going on? He walked down a dark road, scowling and cursing the owner. He kicked another pebble and exhaled angrily. In. Out, calm down. What the hell just happened? This question was reflected on everyone's faces after Naruto's departure. And they looked at his teammates for explanation. Do you have any idea what might have happened? Between these two, cuz this owner is a pretty decent man as far as I know him. Choji said as soon as the man stormed away. Sakura picked idly at her food, and carelessly responded, who knows, Naruto's always causing trouble anyway, he must have done something to the owner. Even though a few agreed with her, some were forced to narrow their eyes at her too. Don't you think it's time you at least considered him a comrade? Shikamaru said angrily, his voice low. However much you hate him, he's in your team. You can't just ignore him. Surprisingly, even Ino found herself nodding at Shikamaru's words. As if on cue, Kiba pointed a finger at Sasuke and said, at least you should stand up for him. While all this sudden sympathy surprised Sasuke, he didn't respond much. He didn't need to rely on that dobe all the time. He didn't need to. But somewhere even he felt guilty. However, Sakura huffed at them. Why are you blaming us? When have you tried being all buddy-buddy with him? However much they would hate to admit it, she was right. They themselves hadn't ever talked to him that much. Except maybe Kiba and Shikamaru. Apart from this, how many of you plan on giving the Chunin exams? Shino asked, changing the topic completely. All of them raised their hands and started rambling, the previous topic forgotten. He entered the apartment and found it in a mess. It wasn't surprising, considering for how long he didn't come back. They really killed it this time. Naruto muttered to himself, examining his ripped mattress. He gently put it down, patted it and shook his head, hoping its journey to heaven was a safe one. He made a few clones, who groaned at the state of the house, and reluctantly began cleaning it up. One of them got angry and almost set out to find the culprits. "This is just not fair," he shouted, holding up a broken cup. "I know, right," another one said, nodding vigorously. "Where are we going to get another mattress from? Do we need it? He rarely sleeps." "You mean, we?" "What? Never mind." Sometimes, he was glad he learnt the shadow clone jutsu from Kurama. This was the best jutsu ever. After a lot of rambling and arguing, the house was finally somewhat clean. "Thanks guys." Naruto thanked them. "Yeah, whatever," another replied, stretching his hands. After dispersing them, Naruto jumped out of his window, because using the door is so old school, and went out to the training camp. "What are we doing today, Kurama?" With a bored sigh, Kurama took his human form. "Why isn't Kido Hitomi here?" he asked lazily, his red hair blowing in the wind. "Oh, I dunno, they said they're somewhere near the hidden sand." Naruto replied lazily, twirling his katana in one hand. "Alright, have you heard of Rasengan?" Kurama asked him with a sly smile. 5 a.m. in the morning, and a certain blonde lay in the grass, gasping for air. His hands twitched moment to moment, and a red-haired man hissed at him. "It's not easy," he said for the millionth time, "but it's not that hard either." I know. Naruto shouted with frustration. He should have at least gotten a small idea of how to do this shit. But unfortunately, he had no idea about what to think. He couldn't visualize it. He got up and was about to begin grunting and collecting chakra, but Kurama stopped him. "At 5 in the morning. You should freshen up. Kakashi is gonna teach you something new today." He said new, like it was a question. Maybe he had already learnt that jutsu or punch or whatever. "Alright," Naruto said, and Kurama went back to sleeping inside Naruto's seal with a poof. "Today, miners, we are going to learn how to walk on tree, water, or literally any goddamn thing," Kakashi cheerfully said, waving around a finger as he led them through a forest. Naruto groaned inwardly, as he already knew it. And once you knew how to do something, it took more efforts to undo it or whatever. Basically, it was harder for him to fake incompetence when he could do it as easily as he could breathe. Sakura chirped up at this. "Boo! Doesn't that require acute chakra control?" Kakashi smiled at her and replied, "Not acute but good, I would say. Acute chakra control is needed in medical ninjutsu." "Same thing," she beamed. Kakashi made them stop near a grove of huge broad trees. Without waiting for them, Kakashi simply walked up to the tree and started walking on it. He walked upside down on a branch, much to Sakura and Sasuke's amazement. Sasuke was quite surprised and eager, but didn't show it. Meanwhile, the Uzumaki stifled a yawn and laid down on a soft patch of grass. Soon, a pair of soft footsteps approached him, and when he cracked open an eye, he was met with the glaring eyes of his sensei. And how? His voice was steely, as if he would start yelling at him at any moment. "Do you do this?" Naruto Uzumaki gulped, regained his composure and cleared his throat. "We send chakra to our feet." Kakashi raised a brow. "For what?" he questioned. "For, Naruto racked his brain for the right word, but it just didn't come to him. "For sticking to whatever terrain or substance we want to walk on," he answered sheepishly. Kakashi seemed to be fine with that answer as he went back to walking on trees. Soon he found a shady spot in a tall, leafy tree and made himself comfortable. He opened up his book and lay down. "How do we do this?" Sasuke unwillingly asked him. "Just send chakra to your feet." This was the only advice that they received from their sensei. And so began their grueling training. To their extreme surprise, Sakura was the first person to climb the tree. And she did it with such an ease that made the whole thing look easy. Now, of course Naruto could do it, but hey! Give people credit when they deserve it, okay? Yeah! He stared at her form as she walked over to the highest branch and gingerly, after testing its strength, sat on it. She looked down at her teammates and stuck out her tongue at Naruto's gaping form. "Is she looking down at me?" Naruto thought in shock with a hint of accusation while Kurama laughed at the implication of a literal metaphor. "Look at me, Sasuke!" She called out to the Uchiha from top. Sasuke just stared back and then whipped his head towards Naruto. His eyes held a clear challenge. "Let's see who's better. You or me?" It was an obvious invitation which Naruto accepted with a wide grin. They whipped out their kunais and ran up the tree with renewed vigor. Naruto kept pace with Sasuke, occasionally running further than he did. Basically, he was teasing him. And Sasuke did not know that. Meanwhile Kakashi, from high up on another tree, observed the boys. He wasn't able to understand why Naruto was copying Sasuke. He remembered watching Naruto, or his clone, jump up from a tree and attacking him during the bell test. Anyways, kids these days were just unpredictable. He took out his watch and checked the time, after which he shushined to his team and informed them that their tree walk-in time was up. "You can practice later," he told the boys who had groaned and Tsuke in response. "Just give us 10 more minutes, sensei, let me beat his ass," Naruto shouted, pumping his fist in the air. Kakashi facepalmed as he was reminded of Might Guy with that look of, well, youth. Fine. He had barely even finished saying that when the two boys ran up their respective trees with a battle cry. With a sigh, he put a hand at Sakura's shoulder and then began telling her about the advantages of having good chakra control. "You can become a medical ninja," he told her happily, holding up a finger and then holding up another finger, he said, "or, you could become an incredible taijutsu user." After shrieking with delight for a while, Sakura asks him, "Wait, how is taijutsu related to chakra control?" Kakashi looks at her with a sagely wisdom, and begins the story of one of legendary Sanins, Tsunade Senju. While Team 7 practiced tree walking and various other skills, the other teams worked on their specialties as well. Kiba, Shino and Hinata used their sensory jutsus to see through Kurenai's genjutsu. They also worked on some special moves that they could use in emergencies. Ino, Choji and Shikamaru worked on their seordination. The Inoshikacho formation was one of the Hidden Leaf's most famous formation and it was Asuma's job to train the next Inoshikacho. They did well, except for the fact that Choji was unable to bring himself to hurt Asuma, even if it was a mock battle. "I can't," he whined, and the rest of his teammates let out a frustrated sigh. Team Guy regularly climbed cliffs, much to Tenten's annoyance, and Lee worked on his leaf hurricane. Niji worked on his rotation while Teneten mastered other various weapons. During day it was training with his team and stamina increasing exercises, at night it was mastering the Rasengan. Kurama wasn't very good at this though. No, not like that. Compress and spin. Kurama reminded him for the millionth time. "I know, but how do I compress and spin?" Naruto shouted in frustration as he fell on his butt. "How am I supposed to know?" I dunno, compress and spin," Kurama said again, and Naruto groaned as he covered his face with his palm. "Gosh." Kurama sat down next to him and stayed silent for a while, after which he told him in an even tone that it was quite a difficult jutsu, "It's a rank, you know." Naruto tsked and plucked at the grass. How did the fourth even come up with this stuff? Naruto wondered out loud. He failed to notice Kurama slightly wincing at it. Kurama just couldn't understand when and how to tell him about his parentage. You know, maybe Jiraiya can help, he said, turning to the blonde. Jiraiya as in, the legendary Sannin? Naruto asked with visible shock. Kurama grinned at him and held up a thumbs up. The hand sign, not the drink. What, wait. You think he'll actually teach me? Naruto sputtered and Kurama couldn't help but laugh since rarely anything made Naruto sputter. Hey, don't laugh at me, tenant. Naruto pouted with a oomph. Whatever, don't be so surprised, after all, he was the one who taught the fourth Hokage. Kurama said with a wink and laughed again at Naruto's reaction. Sasuke wasn't satisfied with the training he did with his team. He wanted to learn something more, something new. He wasn't half as interested in pushing chakra to his feet to run faster than he was in learning a new jutsu. So, after a few weeks of regular training and sparring, he went up to Kakashi and demanded to learn a new jutsu. Kakashi looked at him for a while and then said something that startled the young Uchiha. You are afraid of his growth. Sasuke was taken aback at the bluntness, but then with a scowl he retaliated, I am not afraid of anyone's growth. Kakashi merely raised an eyebrow at that but made no further comment. Meet me on top of the mountain tomorrow after training. Sasuke nodded and went back to his bickering teammates. I bet he can walk on water earlier than you. Sakura bragged, to which Naruto let out a long and then crossed his arms and said, why do you always support him? Am I not your teammate? It wasn't said in an accusing tone, but Sakura faltered in whatever she was going to say, remembering the discussion in the restaurant she had with her friends after Naruto had left. Just then Sasuke arrived and they went back to their training. Sasuke reached the top of the mountain later that evening and was surprised to see Kakashi there. Not only was he on time, but he was early as well. And Sasuke thought he was early. With an eye roll he approached Kakashi and the man slowly looked up from the book that he was reading. Before Sasuke could say a word, Kakashi held up a finger and narrowed his eyes at the book, after which he widened them. He shut the book and looked up at the sky and shook his head, eyes as wide as ever. With a sigh he tucked the book into his vest. I hate cliffhangers, Kakashi muttered. Sasuke just stood there and stared at him impassively, waiting for his sensei to get over it already. With another sigh and shake of his head, Kakashi turned to look at his student. Honestly, he didn't like this kid's hair. But that's not the point, his inner self reminded him. He looked at Sasuke and mentally checked the boxes required for learning the special jutsu that he was gonna teach this boy. Speed, check. Skill, check. Perseverance, check. Determination, check. Chakra, check. Alright, so today I'm gonna teach you the basics of Chidori. Ever heard of it? Kakashi asked him with a superior look. But when Sasuke slowly shook his head, his superiority suffered huge damage. He gave a pained look to Sasuke and said with a drawl, what did you guys even learn at the academy? When I was your age, he was cut off by a sound of annoyance by Sasuke. Can we start already? He interjected. Fine. His sensei held down his hand and soon a small ball/sphere of lightning/electricity, guys let's just go with lightning K, started forming. It looked powerful as well as destructive. It emitted a weird sound, like the chirping of birds, but not exactly. Soon the electricity vanished and Kakashi grinned to himself at the look on Sasuke's face. You look like you just saw lightning in my hands, he said, with a lopsided smile, not that Sasuke could see it. Though by the way Sasuke deadpanned, it didn't seem like he got the joke. How? Was all Sasuke asked. Well. And so Kakashi began explaining him the working of the Chidori. Sakura quickly ran away to do some shopping after training and Sasuke just headed to wherever he does. Naruto himself started walking towards a random direction when he sensed someone following him. He whipped around and saw a box on the ground. It was colored brown but didn't even match the color of the ground. He just stood there staring at the box until finally it blew up and 3 coughing kids emerged. Well. It looks like you saw through our disguise again. As expected from my rival. Konohamaru said with enthusiasm, while Udon and Moegi stood next to coughing. Maybe we shouldn't have used so many firecrackers. Udon advised. What are you doing here, Konohamaru? Naruto asked him. He was a naughty young boy and liked to play tricks on the villagers with Naruto, but he was never scolded just because he was the grandson of the old man third Hokage. Konohamaru didn't like it either, being called the third's grandson all the time, and had announced himself as Naruto's rival. He was one of the few people whom Naruto actually liked. Big bro, where were you that week? We looked for you everywhere. He complained. Naruto tensed up, and avoided the question by laughing and replied, I was away training for the Chunin exams, of course. At this their eyes shone and they peppered him with question. He began answering them, but a few minutes later their sensei, Ebisu, appeared and with a sigh of frustration pulled them away from the blonde. How many times have I told you to stay away from that brat? He stage whispered, making sure Naruto heard what he had to say about him. Hey, Konohamaru began, but was shushed by Ebisu, who whisked them away. With a sigh, he stood up and brushed his pants. He started walking towards a random direction and ended up near the hot springs. It was a nice place to hang out and he could, occasionally, get a look. He leaned on the railing practicing some random hand signs, hoping he didn't accidentally invent a new jutsu, even though it was highly unlikely. Hey Kit. He's here. Hey Kur. He who? He, hold up. Did you just call me Kur? Never mind. He who? Never call me Kur, get it? Yeah, whatever. Who's here? Him. Jiraiya. He what? Are you serious? How do you even know? My senses haven't dulled yet, boy. Kurama said with a laugh and then directed Naruto towards the direction of the legendary Sannin. Kurama grinned to himself, the kid was in for a surprise. Naruto slowly walked towards the part of the hot springs where Jiraiya was and tried to imagine how he might look. Would he be really old? Was he cool? Did he have short hair or long hair? Did he even have hair? With this, he turned round a corner and found an old man peeking through the doors of the female rooms. He had long white hair and wore traditional clothes. He giggled to himself and Naruto narrowed his eyes at the man. He didn't have time for pervy old men, he had to find Jiraiya, the man who had apparently taught the fourth. But he couldn't just ignore such behavior. Finally, after a mental debate with himself, he walked towards the old man and patted him on the shoulders. He didn't respond. Naruto pursed his lips and crossed his arms, now thoroughly annoyed by this man. If you ignore me this time, I will honestly shout. He tried threatening the man, but to no avail. The man simply shifted to get a better view. Naruto moved behind him and aimed his hand for that part of the neck which would render the man unconscious. Just a second before contact, the man stopped him. Naruto looked at the man with wide eyes, and he turned around. A ninja, huh? He smirked. You'll have to do better than that. He let his hand go and walked away from the room. Naruto's hand fell, but he regained his composure and before the man could walk away he asked, "Who are you?" The man stopped and smirked. He turned around and spread out his arms. Then he suddenly jumped into the air, and a frog appeared over which he landed. He held out a hand front and back in a pose, lifted one leg and hopped thrice. I am Jiraiya, the Toad Sage of Mount Mayaboku, one of the legendary Sannin. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if and want to see next part of it, comment down below and let me know. Also share this video with your friends. See you in the next video. Peace.